Podcast. This is episode 127, An Alternate Universe with Vaughan Fleischfresser. I'm going to start with a quote. The music department is an alternate universe where pupils are often unrecognizable from who they are outside of it. The shy become confident, the agitated become calm, the lonely become included, the quiet become heard, and the lost become found. Music reveals the real child. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, that's because this was the viral tweet and screen grab image that went viral all over Facebook and social media, Instagram, everywhere. And those are the words of Vaughan Fleischfresser. In fact, you probably recognize Vaughan just by looking at him due to his massive quantity of viral music education memes. I kept seeing them in my feed on a daily basis and have shared them, many of them myself. What I found intriguing was the talent he seems to have and the ability to distill and present them in a way that is both thorough and concise. Ideas that the world needs to hear about music education and its importance. In this episode, we learn about Vaughan, his professional life as an educator in the UK and Australia, and his approach to music education advocacy. You will not want to miss this conversation that is sure to have you excited about the future of music ed. Stick around. Before we get into that conversation, of course, don't forget to use your promo code at sightreadingfactory.com when you get your membership. Every single time you sign up, I want you to throw Choralosophy in that discount code. That helps the show a lot, and it gives you a discount. And you could do the same thing at the other websites that sponsor this show, mymusicfolders.com. You can get a discount when you get all their choir folders. Sheet music at ryanmain.com and graphitepublishing.com. You can throw the promo code in there as well. And of course, don't forget to head over to Choralosophy Patreon group, which is patreon.com/Choralosophy, and sign up for $3 a month or more and support financially the costs, the recurring costs of doing the show. It really, really helps a lot. The producers at Patreon are Brannigan Lawrence, Brian Long, Venture Studios, John Warner, Jonah Clixbull, Ulrika Igrain, Munoz Alarcon, Angie Schilling, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Jared Hendricks, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. Okay, everybody, I am here with Vaughan Fleischfresser, who I'm going to dub here today the Music Education Meme King. And we are excited to have a conversation about music education advocacy, why it's so important for us in our schools, and why it's so important for us as educators to fight for it. So, Vaughan, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Chris. It's fantastic to be here with you.
Well, tell us a little bit about you. Where do you come from, and what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Well, I'm in Scotland as we speak. That's where I live now, but I was born and bred in Australia, in a small country town inland from Brisbane in the state of Queensland. And I grew up on a farm. And at the age of 6, my parents gave me a saxophone and it changed my life.
Wow. And what do you do now then as far as work? What brings you to Scotland?
Well, I teach music, and music in the UK and Australia is quite different to that in America, in that what you call general music is our music from when pupils begin school all the way until they finish it. And bands, choirs, and orchestras happen in addition to that. So I trained to be a music teacher, and I came to Scotland in 2007 on a working holiday, and I didn't realize it, but my wife lived here. And so I so met my wife and found a job here and really enjoyed it. So settled here. And then in my summers, I lived in Chicago and did a master's degree over at Vandercook College of Music.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I decided to set up home here, and that's why Scotland is now home.
Okay, that's wonderful. So just making sure I interpret your story correctly, most of the teaching that you do, if you're a school teacher in a school, is general music. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first 12 years of my career, we call it classroom music. And so that's from when a child starts school until when they get to the point in school where they have to choose what subjects they do. So up until the age of 16, their experience of music is what we call classroom music, or what you call general music. So that's the bread and butter of what I do. At the moment, I'm in a primary school, or an elementary school, I guess you would call it. So teaching kids from the age of 4 through to 10. But then what also happens here is if you teach in the classroom, you also have to be a jack of many trades, and so you invariably take bands or choirs or orchestras because it's through the instrument that we fall in love with what we do. So I also take a beginner band, I take a young choir, I work with community bands, I work with lots of groups who want me to come and work with their bands in high schools, primary schools, community groups. So a real mix of things at the moment.
Okay. So if you're so these bands and choirs that get put together, then I'm just trying to understand the landscape of what you do over there. First, these are put together outside of class, then I'm assuming. So these are extracurricular, so to speak.
Yeah, depending on the language of the school, it's extracurricular or
Okay.
co-curricular. But in addition to having the classroom music, we also have a thing called instrumental music, where teachers come in and teach instruments to the kids. So they'll go out of class and say have a half an hour lesson once a week. That time changes throughout the year, so they're not missing the same lesson. And then before school or after school, once or twice a week, they will be in a band, a choir, or an orchestra.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm aware in general of how music is delivered differently in school in the UK and Scotland. Is Australia similar?
Yes. Yes, it's
Okay.
basically the same as it is here. Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so let's dive into this main idea here, which is that you have figured out a way somehow to just capture people's minds and spirits with these brilliant tweets and little mini essays on the value of music education. And it's pretty fascinating because people just love to share them all over the place. Is there a story there of how that got started?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been quite humbling. I think it was January. I had the first one that went viral, so to speak, and things have been quite different since then. But um, I've moved around the world a lot with my job. I mean, I came here in 2007. I lived here for 5 years, and then I lived in Chicago for those 3 summers to do my master's degree. And then when I married my wife, we went back to Australia, and I lived there for a couple of years. And then we decided to move back. As I said, I've taught high school music, I've taught primary school music, I've lectured at universities, I've conducted bands, choirs, orchestras. So I've worked at every single phase of music education. I've
Hmm.
taught in 2 countries, I've lived in three. I have quite a unique name. So it got to a point where coming back to Scotland for the second time, I was finding it hard to get a job because let's be honest, if you look at me on paper, I do appear to be made up. But thankfully, people now realize that I'm a real person. And so essentially, I started Twitter to just share my thoughts and to try and connect with the music education community here in Scotland, because in the part of Australia where I grew up, I'd come through the system, so people who knew I was, whereas here I was just a strange name with what appeared to be a made-up CV. So I just started to share my thoughts, and for a while I was just sharing them with myself because there wasn't much coming back. But then I just persisted because the experience I've had of music education, as hopefully comes through in my tweets, has, I really believe, shaped me as a person and given me the qualities and the skills and the characteristics needed to survive all of the challenges I've had along the way. So I just kept sharing and sharing, and then more people started to find me. And then in January, I did my alternate universe tweet, and I woke up the next morning. A lot of my pals in the States had messaged me on Facebook and said, Vaughan, I don't know if you know it, but you're all over Facebook and Twitter. And I checked my phone, and they were correct. And then Classic FM, who have over 3 million followers on their Facebook page, they started to share my tweets, and then other people started to share them, and then it just spiraled out of control. And before I knew it, I think I've now got over 8,000 followers on Twitter, and I had to start a Facebook page to try and keep up with everything. So it's been a bit wild, but it's been humbling, because the reason I started to share it was because I believe so much in what we do. And I think so fondly of the impact it's had on me, not only through my days as a child at school, but as an adult. And clearly that resonates with people. And so it's humbling, and it's also quite exciting because I get to meet wonderful people like yourself and connect with people all over the world who have a similar passion for the most amazing thing that we do, which is to teach music.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. And so, of course, you don't have to sell me. You're preaching to the choir here on why these things are so important. So let's dive into some of these, because I'm interested in just kind of hearing some of the thoughts behind what you write. Because, of course, I'm on Twitter as well. And one of the things that I know about Twitter is that you've got to get a whole bunch of thinking into a pretty small little box in order for it to work. And so I think there's always layers to discuss. And so I think this will be fun, and people will probably recognize a lot of these, because music educators, yes, obviously are going to resonate with all these words, because these are, this is our evangelism, so to speak. This is what we're talking about. But what I like about what you've done is that you have distilled them. For better or for worse, our world is such that if you can't fit it into a small box, it's hard to get the message across. We kind of have this bumper sticker society in a lot of ways. And so you've masterfully done that. So I'm going to read one. And it is that first one that you were talking about, the alternate universe. And this is for my audience, since they're mostly listening and they won't be able to see this. The music department is an alternate universe where pupils are often unrecognizable from who they are outside of it. The shy become confident, the agitated become calm, the lonely become included, and the quiet become heard, and the lost become found. Music reveals the real child. Did that come from somewhere, like an experience in your classroom on that particular day, or what was the inspiration? Was there a muse?
Sure. Yeah, well, every tweet that I have usually comes from something that's happened that day or that week. I usually tweet twice a day, and one is on the drive home, and then the other one is when the kids are in bed and I'm just relaxing on the couch, reflecting on the day. So that one came about a conversation I'd had that day with a colleague, and they had come up and they'd said, what's Johnny like in music? And I said, Johnny, oh yeah, he's great. He's fantastic. He comes to class. He's focused. He's on task. He's really engaged. He's really well behaved. He produces amazing work, and he just has the most amazing time. And there was a pause, and the teacher had the most shocked look on their face, and they said, are we talking about the same Johnny? And I said, yeah, we're talking about Johnny. Is that not how he's like in other classes? And the answer was no. He was basically the complete opposite. He struggles in other classes, and obviously I've changed his name for the purposes of this chat. And they just didn't believe the description I was giving of this young boy. And so I went home and I thought about that, and I thought, I've had this conversation a lot through my career with a lot of colleagues in many, many countries. And it's always about someone who has a reputation outside of the music classroom as essentially being a troublemaker or slightly lazy, whereas in music, they're just a shining light. And I started to think, well, why is that? And then I thought, well, I was kind of the same. I was shy, but then when I had the saxophone in my hand and I was on stage, I was just another person. And then, yeah, it got me thinking of other young people who I'd taught who had difficult home lives and therefore, acted out in school. But then when they were in music, they were calm, they were grounded, they felt safe, they felt at home. And it just led from there, and it just came out, and I wrote it out and I tweeted it and I went to bed and then woke up the next morning and things were different.
I imagine. So, what's interesting about this one is I agree with it as a principle, and I'm picking out some of the lines in here, like the shy become confident, and that I resonate with that because I run a choir program, so we're in school and they're all performance-based classes. And I get kids up on stage and performing and singing in front of people who are maybe they're not the athlete, the star athlete. Maybe they're not the star of the musical. Maybe they're not an academic all-American, so to speak, student. But they are confident, competent, and able to find something in my class that maybe they've struggled to find in other places. And it seems like that's in a lot of ways what you're getting at here, is that there are some kids that are able to come into a music class and almost sit down at a buffet and just indulge, when in other classes they're turned away. And I don't mean it turned away like an on purpose, like their math teacher doesn't care about them or anything like that. It's that there's something about a music education environment that allows them to see themselves differently. Is that resonate with you at all?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think every young person has the ability to shine. And in education, we need to find that place for them to shine. And for many young people, it's in a music classroom or in an art classroom.
Hmm.
And, I also say many young people walk through school wondering where they fit when it's music where they fit. And so it's that alternate universe that's created. They're given the instrument, they're given that voice, and then through that voice, they're able to connect with others and be accepted. And then through that, they're able to realize that they're good at something, and then that builds their confidence, and then that gives them a purpose, and then they feel like they belong. And then before you know it, they don't want to leave the music classroom, because
Uh-huh.
when they're there, they feel comfortable, and they feel like they can express themselves, and they feel like they can shine.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Now, what do you think about the idea that when we've been talking about some kids discover that music is where they fit? What do you think of the idea that some kids would discover that they don't fit in music?
Absolutely. No, and that's one of the things I've really found interesting from a lot of my tweets now gaining a lot of traction is the mixed comments that I get.
Yeah.
Not everyone has a positive music education experience, and that's something that fuels me to try and empower teachers more and more to ensure that we are giving young people a music education. Is the education that we're giving them relevant? Is it meaningful to the life they have and the communities that they live in? And so I think that's an important thing we need to look at as a profession moving forward, because for me, every young child should have a meaningful and a engaging music education. And that's a difficult thing. And I think that's going to take a lot of out of the box thinking from us to try and move away from, some people are just used to doing what they're doing year after year, and that's what they do. But as you said, for some people, they come into the room and that doesn't work for them. So, I think we have to work hard to try and get everyone into music, because yes, music itself, the class mightn't engage them, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't engage with music in some form. So we need to make sure that when they come into our classroom, we're meeting them halfway so that they can develop that love of music more and gain something really beneficial out of it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And one of the ways I think of this is like I know that in music education, one of the things that we do a lot is we fall on our own swords, so to speak, and it's very important for us to believe in the idea of including everyone in our instruction and making music something that's for everyone, but at the same time recognizing that our definition of what music is for everyone means might be different than some of our students. They might not all need to be a part of the choir or part of the orchestra or a soloist or like taking 7 or 8 years of the class. Maybe they need an introductory education and then need to move on to their true passion, which is engineering or football
Mhm.
or something, and that's okay. I think sometimes when I say fall on our sword, we like to punish ourselves if some of the kids don't choose us, so to speak, if they don't
Yeah,
choose
yeah.
music. Is that something that you ever come across or feel?
Yeah, well, I think it's different for me having that basis of classroom music being
True.
the function for the majority of their time, because we get to, I think, give our young people a slightly broader experience. We get to engage in music technology, we get to do a lot of composition, we get to do a lot of, production. So we can really cater to a lot of the changing and more varied tastes of young people. So I think we're quite lucky in that regard. But absolutely, I mean, I don't for a minute want every person I teach to go on to become a professional musician or a teacher. I just want them to have music with them so they
Hmm.
can go on to use it through their life. I mean, I share the story a lot of the birth of my second child was a planned cesarean, and so I was sat there in the operating theatre, bit of a spare wheel in the corner, and someone turned to me and said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm actually a music teacher." And the next 5 minutes, the most beautiful conversation came about with the anaesthetist and the surgeon and the nurses and the doctors all sharing how they had learnt an instrument at school. They'd been in bands and choirs and orchestras, and how that had helped them through school, helped them through university, and how it helped them to continue to cope in the high stress jobs that they have. So, yeah, absolutely. It's about finding a way that we can set people up with music and they can take that through their life in whatever way that might be.
If your school or church are in the market for staging products like risers, shelves, podiums, movable platforms, all of the things that you need to set your choir up for success, I would like to strongly urge you to check out StageRight. StageRight's products are sturdy, they're durable, they're easy to use. I have personal experience with the acoustical shelves and some of the platforms that they have at StageRight, and I can tell you, compared to some of the more expensive competitors, they are a really great option to fit inside of a tight school budget, but also to give you the durability and usability that you need. So check out StageRight at stageright.com. It's awesome. I'm going to go to another tweet now, because I think this is another really important one. It's actually currently your pinned tweet. It says, for the listening audience, music isn't a second-class subject. Music teachers aren't second-class teachers, and music isn't just a nice little extra. Music is core, music is fundamental to a holistic and meaningful education, and music teachers make such a positive and lifelong impact on the lives of so many. And of course, if you're a music teacher, you're applauding, right? You're standing up and you're applauding that's a something that we all feel, and many of us have felt in our careers as we might work in a building or in an institution that oftentimes will treat us as if we are, the special teacher or the special subject, or here are all the core subjects, and then here are all the fine arts people, and there's something different. Is there a story behind this one? Did somebody slap your hand in a way that you didn't like?
No, this is kind of a cumulative thought which bubbles up in me quite regularly through conversations with friends and colleagues, and then little interactions that you have along the way, and it just comes to the fore. Oh, couldn't come to music because I've got a sports match, or I miss my music lesson so that I can go to a maths class, or someone in Australia saying, oh, they've reduced the provision of music in my primary school. Now they're doing music for a term, and then they're doing art for a term, they're doing drama for a term, whereas we used to have music for the whole year. Or someone saying that their budget's been completely cut, or just those stories that we're so used to as music teachers. And then I had just recently been on a weekend where adults from all over the UK were able to sign up for a weekend to essentially come and form a concert band. And they'd arrive on a Friday night at a hotel, and we'd rehearse in the evening, and then have a social, rehearse all day Saturday, have another meal on the Saturday evening, and then wake up and do a concert on the Sunday. And there were 80 people from all over the UK, and from varied professions, from the age of 20 through to 80. And I was just sharing conversations with them, and they were just saying how much music means to them, and how much it's something that helps them get through life. And
Uh-huh.
then I was thinking of a young boy who I taught, who had learnt the drums, wasn't really connecting with it, and then his mum said, how can I get him to keep going with the drums? We really want him to get into it. And I said, why don't you get him to come along and join my band? And so he came along, and he went from learning the drums by himself to being part of something bigger. And I just saw the change in the young boy. He had a new bounce in his step, he had a new attitude. And his mum came and saw me and said, wow, what a transformation in my boy, all because of music. And I just thought, what we do is so important. And it's not just important in the moment, it's important so many years down the track. and
Mm-hmm.
and so that just came out. It was a cathartic moment where I was expressing for myself, but more so for the profession. And yes, we all know this, but I think we need to shout from the rooftops a lot more.
Yeah. Now, of course, so you mentioned we all know this. You're talking to someone who agrees here again. Now, with this particular tweet about music being core, or music being equivalent, so to speak, to what are oftentimes called core subjects, did you get any pushback, any replies on Twitter that stood out to you as, like, people who just flat out disagreeing? In other words, what do you say to the person who doesn't understand why this is as important as other subjects?
Mhm. Well, no, not on Twitter. I think people who engage with me on Twitter seem to be a lot more friendly than. It's more on Facebook when it gets
Oh,
shared by. What's really on Facebook when it gets shared by, say, Classic FM, or someone with a significantly large number of followings. That's when
right.
I get the varied comments, and that one hasn't been shared on a larger forum than my Twitter following. But for me, it's I bring it down to three things when I'm advocating for the subject. I talk about the subject, I talk about the student, and I talk about the school. And if we start with the subject of music, if you think about, my children are now 3 and 6, and I've just been so amazed by the role music has played in their development. You know, the singing to them, and then they were singing tunes before they were speaking, and so it was through singing that they learnt to speak. The whole use of rhythm and beat and pattern and coordination to start walking. Um, the whole developing of neural pathways. I mean, my son could sing the melodies to about 3 or 4 nursery rhymes before he could even say a word. So music is with us right from day dot, and so and it's a way that we use to express ourselves. It's the patterns that are informed in it. And then in terms of when we get to the music we have, it is a really academic and analytical subject. I mean, we go into score analysis. We look at the history behind things. We look at the meaning behind things. And then we look at young people who have to create, their own music. They have to compose up to, depending how long they take music, they have to compose music anywhere up to 5 to 10 minutes in length. And that's a significant undertaking for anyone, let alone a young person. So there's the balance that it provides in music as a subject. It uses both sides of the brain. And
Hmm.
here, the people who study music invariably end up being, I think your word for is the valedictorian. The person who ends up being the most successfully academic in the school. They study music because it provides that academic rigor, but it also provides a wonderful balance because they're able to express themselves. They're able to find that voice, and it's really the whole package. And then, as I come back to in the end, it educates the whole child. We educate them academically, we educate them emotionally, we educate them spiritually, and we educate them socially. And so for me, it's the whole package. People want their young people to be challenged academically. Well, music does that. We want our young people to be happy. Music does that. We want our young people to have a balanced education, which helps them to succeed in life. And music's a big part of that.
Now, do you ever have any theories or think about why that is? Like, what is the magic power, so to speak, of music? Because I agree with you, but I'm just curious to hear what you think about why it is that music can make a person happy, or that can access them spiritually, or we can access the other parts of them that other subjects can't do.
Well, from day dot, music is all around us. If a movie wants to make a section sad, they put music that just you know uh, brings out that emotion. When we're happy, we dance. When we're happy, we sing. It's there. It's all around us, and so um, that's why it's easy to sell it for me, because music is everywhere. Try and go a day without music. Try and go to any important event. We've just had Remembrance Day here, and music is played. Funerals, music. Weddings, music. Before a sport game begins, music. Over here, where football, soccer is a major thing, people sing constantly throughout it. People need to make music because it makes things better. It helps us to cope. So it's that's for me. That's the real kick with it.
Yeah, I like to also, because I agree with all those things. I like to add in some of the new research and the growing body of information we have about what the music is doing in our brain,
Hmm.
because I think there's a connection there. I don't think it's a coincidence that making music with others, for example, um, has all these physiological effects on us, on our brain, on our heart rate, on our blood pressure.
Hmm.
All of these things that we can now measure. I don't think it's a coincidence that those things happen. And also, if they put us on a brain scan or an MRI as we're doing music, it's like a fireworks display of whole brain activity. And
Hmm.
there aren't any other subjects that they do in school, that kids do in school, that do that.
Hmm.
And I think that that's a really, really exciting thing. And I think we're scratching the surface of understanding why
Hmm.
all of those things are happening, because that to me fascinates me, and as a possible way for us to, so to speak, put a nail in the coffin of this argument with people who don't understand. Like, we need to be able to.
Uh-huh.
There will be some people who need to see proof
Yes.
that these things have a profound effect on our physiology.
Well, I mean, I remember once I was doing a gig and I had a migraine, and it was almost at the point where I was going to have to pull out of the gig, but it was one of the most important ones of my playing career up until that point. So I was having none of it, and I was backstage, cold towel over my head, eyes closed in the corner, thinking, am I going to be able to do this? And then I go on stage in front of 5,000 people, play my saxophone for 45 minutes. Migraine? What migraine? Go back off stage, it comes back, and I'm instantly, in pain again. And then you think about, I conduct a community wind band every week, and you'll be walking along to the rehearsal. You've had a hard day, you're tired, you're lethargic, and then after the rehearsal you're walking back home. You've got a spring in your step, you've got a smile on your face, you're just more relaxed, your shoulders are lighter, because making music with others, it just, as you say, it has that impact. It is fascinating. I agree. I completely agree. I think it's a fascinating area.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I've got another one here. And I really like this one too, because this is, for me as a music educator, one of my missions and one of the things that motivates me. So this one is about this idea. So some young people need the stage to shine. Some need a musical instrument to express themselves. Some need music ensembles to form much needed friendships. Some need music to cope with the many challenges of life. It's so important that we have music education in our schools. To me, and of course, these are your words, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like with this one, we're kind of touching on the importance of music socially for kids, is that it's an opportunity for them to interact with other people in a different way than in their other classes that are a little bit more individualistic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also for me, there's many layers. The first one about, the kid who shines on the stage, I can think of many young people who I've taught who, when other colleagues come along to a Christmas concert or an end of year concert, and they see someone singing on stage, and they come up to you and you say, wow, is that the same person who I teach? And it's just, yep. And they'll say, oh, they don't say a word in class, but there they are, singing at the top of their lungs with a smile on their face, animated. And so that's that one. And then I think the ensemble and finding friendships, it's tough being a young person these days. It's tough making friendships. It's tough making connections in this online world. And so being in an ensemble, and particularly in the UK and Australia, where it's an extracurricular thing. So you have people in some of the groups, you have people from the first year of high school right through to the last year of high school, all mixing together, making friendships, forming those bonds that then help them when they go outside of the classroom. I'll remember when I was in my first year of high school, I was finding it hard to make friends. I was getting bullied a bit, but then the other saxophonists in my section, they were in their last year of high school and they were really popular. And so when I was out and about, if I was getting any trouble, my band buddies had come over and help me out. And that's something I think that's very unique about music, particularly where we are. Schools are so desperate for people to connect, in the young people in schools across the different year levels, and music ensembles do that. It's just a melting pot of every age group. It's a melting pot of every single social group and status. It's just magic. So there's that really important thing, I think, for music ensembles, that sense of inclusion, that sense of acceptance, and that sense of friendship. I remember wearing my band kid categorization with great pride. It was because I felt so safe there. So yeah, there's that social aspect to it, but there's also that finding your niche, finding what really allows you to shine and helps you to find what you're good at. Because I also think that's another difficult thing for young people. They go to school and they think they have to get good grades, they have to succeed academically, where there's so much more. For some kid, it's singing that solo in the concert that is their thing, and will light their fire, which will take them on through life. So for me, it was just acknowledging the fact that there are so many different young people in our schools, and we have to find a way to help them to shine, to help them to find friends, and to help them find their thing. And I really think what we do for so many people, they can only find through what we do.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And, the social aspect too of, for example, I've got another tweet next to the one that I read a second ago. It's actually from a couple days prior to that one, but it's a very similar one. I grouped them together. It says that it gives them, so music gives them belief. It gets them through the day. It fills their life with friends. So a lot of these things are very similar to what we were just talking about. And I know that for many of us teachers, I don't know very many music teachers who have never had the experience of a student after the term is over, or after the year is over, or graduation, or whatever it is, where that student came to that teacher and said, if it weren't for your music class, I don't know that I would have made it all the way through school.
Mm-hmm.
And that, for me, is a huge aspect of why I do what I do. Yes, of course, it's fun to teach the kids who come already knowing music because they have privileged background with music lessons and perform in musicals outside of school, and they're already confident performers. Every music teacher loves to see those kids.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, those kids don't need us because they already have that support. So we get to showcase them. What I really think is important about this concept is that a music class oftentimes can catch, so to speak, the kids that don't have that support, because that music ensemble can become that support for them and allow them to take off, as you said, to have their fire lit.
Yeah, oh, it's so true. And that was really brought home to me the last time Classic FM shared my alternate universe tweet. I mean, I take time to read through some of the comments, but it gets a bit unmanageable. But it's interesting to read the contrast. Obviously the people who've had the negative music education experience, and that really saddens me and lights my fire. But the people, and as you said, one of the most common comments that is put on there by people from all walks of life is, oh, if it wasn't for choir, if it wasn't for band, if it wasn't for orchestra, I wouldn't have made it through school. And it's such a powerful statement. And I think in everything we do, it has to come back to the music. It's music that makes these groups exist. It's music that brings these people together. But yes, it's the environment that is created through a music ensemble. It's the environment of making music together. It's you learn to be empathetic with people. You learn to understand other people. You have to learn that what you do impacts them directly. And if you don't all work together, and if you aren't connected, you don't produce things that are as amazing as they could be. And then seeing people perform and seeing that jubilation after a concert, I mean, that never leaves you. I can't remember one exam I did at school, but I can remember basically every single concert. And it's down to that feeling of making the music, and that feeling of that exhilaration afterwards, and that even greater connection.
Yeah.
And I speak a lot about music being a safe space and a sanctuary, and I think it comes down to that ensemble. That safety net, that feeling of empathy, that feeling of connection, that feeling of understanding, that feeling of like-mindedness, and that feeling of wanting to continue to have those great feelings and those great experiences together. It's what gets people through school. And I've spoken a lot recently in some of the talks I've given about how that continues through life. I mean, when I moved to Scotland, I knew no one except my girlfriend at the time. And my second night, I took my saxophone to an open jazz jam night and instantly made friends through that. Conversations, where are you from? What do you do? Let's go for a drink next week. And then the next night I went and played my saxophone in a community wind band, and some of the people I sat beside that night are today some of my best and dearest friends. And so it's all through that instrument, it's all through that environment of the music ensemble that you can really take anywhere. And I've done that. I made friends when I moved here. I made friends when I moved back to Australia to a different part. It was obviously when I went to Vandercook, I was there to make music, but when I went out into the community into Chicago, I went and played the saxophone again at some clubs there and met people who weren't on my course, and that just made life better. It made life more manageable. It made life easier. And I think that is something very unique to a music ensemble. I really do.
Yeah. You nailed it on the head there, which is that it all comes down to the music, and it all comes back to the music. Like all these social and emotional things that we're talking about as being so important. Music, this is how I see it. Feel free to push back, but I see it as music is fundamental to all of those things, because those things don't happen if the music isn't happening. So, for example, reading books, reading the written word is very important, and of course, every kid needs to have a good instruction in that. But no one's having these conversations right now about book clubs. You put 60 kids in the room and tell them to read a book, and they're not going to have these connections. They're not going to have this social, because those are individual academic activities. It's there is something about the music and about how we interact with each other And I think there's a lot goes into it. I think I hinted at it before, where there's the brain and the physiological stuff, but then there's also the vulnerability that we have to show to each other when we do music together. I have to be willing, as a singer, I have to be willing to open my mouth and make something that I think is beautiful come out, and run the risk that the thing that comes out is not actually beautiful. And I have to be willing to do it in front of you, which means that I have to have built a certain amount of trust in you. And those little interactions over and over and over as groups rehearse, I think it creates a bond that just wouldn't be there if we didn't have music as the glue.
Hmm. Oh, undoubtedly. And for me,
Hmm.
another big thing is the listening component. You actually have to listen to people and be listened to. And we
Hmm.
we live in a world where people, just they don't listen. I think one of the habits of highly effective people from Stephen Covey is, seek first to understand before being understood. Letting someone finish and understand what they're saying before you answer. Whereas everyone's got the answer in their mouth before anyone's even finished. Whereas music, you have to listen. You have to listen for the melody. You have to listen for the bass line. You have to listen to, are you gelling with the people around you? And that's an amazing thing, I think, that kids really find incredible. Actually listening to each other, and through that listening and connecting with the music, all of these amazing things flow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so now I've got another curiosity here, as we move past your actual tweets. So you told the story already about how this kind of got started. You weren't setting out to be a creator of viral music education memes. That wasn't the goal. It just kind of happened. Now, has that changed over the last year, in that you are now doing some of this intentionally to try to get the word out? Have you taken this platform with more intent going forward?
I certainly haven't changed the way that I go about it. No, because it's for me, it's just sharing thoughts and
Hmm.
ideas at the time. But I'm certainly very aware and humbled by the platform that I now have, and I'm very aware of the traction that a lot of my thoughts are making. And so I do think a lot harder before tweeting, and I
Hmm.
do try and think of every side to it. I try to think, am I being balanced? I don't want to be over the top. I want to be grounded in reality. So it has been wonderful for my personal reflection. In But it's strengthened my resolve to continue sharing my thoughts, because it's the number of people who are saying how much it's inspiring them, how much it's wanting them to continue. I mean, I recently, as a result of this, I was flown to Vancouver to speak at the British Columbia Music Educators Association, which was a wonderful honor. So I flew over there, did the keynote, and when I came back, one of the organizers sent me a text from one of the attendees who said, for the last few months, I've been struggling with the thought of continuing as a music teacher, but Vaughan's talk made me realize why we do what we do, and that I want to continue doing it. And that was like, wow. That was a real world example of
Hmm.
possibly what's happening in people's living rooms or cars as they sit there and look at my random thoughts. It might be something that gets them through the day and gets them to continue the great work they do for another day, which then impacts positively on the life of someone. So it's strengthened my resolve to continue to do it, because there were times when I thought, what's the point? I'm just sharing it into the ether and nothing's coming back. But it's yeah, it's put a lot more weight on it, and it's made me take it, well, not that I didn't take it seriously, but it's made me realize of I need to really think about what I'm saying, because a lot of people are reading it, and it impacts them.
Yeah. Now, do you have any goals for your platform in the future, as far as things you'd like to be able to accomplish? Is it more kind of getting the opportunity to travel more places and speak for more educators? Is that something that you would be interested in doing?
Absolutely. I mean, that would be an
Mhm.
unintended bonus. I mean, I love speaking to other music teachers. I love reminding them about the importance of what we do. I love sharing my experiences. Again, having that unique background of having worked with kids from the age of 3 right through to teaching people who wanted to become music teachers at university, having taught band, choir, orchestra, having lived in 3 countries and studied and worked. It's, I want to share all of these amazing experiences that I've had, and it's been a delightful side effect of these. I mean, I was already presenting a lot in Scotland to lots of the music education associations here, but yeah, as a result of Twitter, I've done a talk in South Africa. I've talked in England. I've gone to Canada. There's more interest coming out of Canada for me to go back and do some more speaking. So absolutely. I mean, I want to spread the message of what we do, and I love it. It's I wish my English teacher could see that I'm actually now being well known for actually writing stuff. If only my assignments were just 240 characters or less. I mean, I think English and maths were my 2 least successful subjects. Yes, yet it's now through the written word where I'm finding my feet. So yes, it's been an amazing ride. But yes, to answer your question, I'd love to speak more. I really enjoy it.
That's great. So last question, kind of last question that'll really make you think on the way out today. What about taking this advocacy habit that we'll lovingly call it? You have an advocacy habit where you go on the internet and you're making your case for the things that you believe in. What are your biggest stresses in your local world, in the UK music education world, that if you could snap your fingers and kind of make the powerful people understand what it is that you want them to understand, what are you up against there in your music education sphere?
Well, like anywhere in the world, there's ebbs and flows in terms of funding. Scotland has been very good recently in raising the funding to provide the opportunity for young people to learn instruments in schools. And so that's a great starting point. But for me, having now worked at every level and having worked at universities, I think we have to focus on where the journey begins. And that's at the beginning of their time in school. And so I think if I could snap my fingers, I would ensure that everyone training to become a primary school teacher had a massive component where they learnt to play an instrument. They studied music the entire way through their university course so that they were able to, really engage young people right from those first moments of school in the music making process. Here in Scotland, we have things called music specialists who go into some primary schools to provide music lessons, but that comes down to area, and what we call the postcode lottery, which we call them local authorities, which local authority is willing to make the investment to put those teachers into schools. So for me, I'd like there to be a much greater focus on the beginning of the journey, right there in those early years. And obviously, I think every young person should have a chance to learn an instrument for the entirety of their time in school, whether that be the voice, whether it be a ukulele, whether it be a orchestral or a concert band instrument. It doesn't matter. I think there needs to be that consistent engagement from day one right through to the end, rather than, okay, now you're in high school, would you like to learn an instrument? Well, yeah, I'd love to, but I think we need to start the journey earlier, because I think by the time people get to middle school, they can be lost from education. They're completely turned off and it's too late to get them back. So having seen everything I've seen over here, I'd just love to have music at the heart of every single primary school or elementary school, I think you would call them. And from there, it's hard to then stop the wave, because the wave has begun and the wave would be amazingly strong.
Hear, hear. I love it. Vaughan, those are all just great thoughts. And I'm so glad that here on a podcast, we don't have to fit everything into the 240 characters, and we can hash out some of these ideas. So on the way out, I think if there are any of my audience members who have somehow been living under a rock and never seen your memes or your tweets, where do we find thoughts of Vaughan Fleischfresser?
Well, the first
got
thing is
stuck there.
The first thing is being able to spell my name.
Yes.
But you can find me on Twitter at V Fleischfresser, and then I just have basically a Facebook page which I started up a few months ago. Really, I just put up pictures of my tweets to connect with those who are on Facebook and not necessarily on Twitter. I drew the line at just 2 forms of social media. People said, what about this, what about that? I said, I've got 2 young kids and I like to sleep. I think I'll just keep it at those 2. So you can find me on Twitter and and Facebook.
Great. That sounds great. And of course, I will put information, links to all those things in the show notes. And for those of you who are audio only listeners, I will put images of the ones that we talked about today as well in the show notes so that you can find them and find Vaughan and keep up with his thoughts. So Vaughan, thank you so much. This was a blast.
Thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate the opportunity. And it's quite fascinating to think about music education at 9 o'clock on a Sunday evening.
Oh, I bet. Yes. Get some sleep. Get some sleep. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of the episode. If you're still here, it means that you know the drill, the big things that you can do to help this show survive. And it does need continuous help from the audience in order to survive. And that is like, share, interact, leave ratings whenever you can in the podcast app on Facebook. And then, of course, join Choralosophy's Patreon subscriber group. That's where you volunteer to chip in a small amount of money each month. And that's patreon.com/Choralosophy. And then last but not least, and probably the biggest thing you can do is shop at the vendors that have promo codes. That's SightReadingFactory.com, RyanMain.com, GraphitePublishing.com, and MyMusicFolders.com. And every time you shop there, enter that Choralosophy checkout. Helps you, helps me. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next time.